Well, here we are. The day I waited years for. The day I longed for, prayed for. The day where my dreams came true. The day where I could talk about The Kissing Booth 2. Even saying that title out loud puts a chill of excitement down my spine because I cannot express how excited I was to watch this movie. The Kissing Booth 2, coronavirus delays included, was my most anticipated movie of this year. If you watched my last video, you may understand why. Actually, no, forget that. You won't. You'll never understand. Nobody will ever understand but me. As someone who loves trashy movies like this, it's so rare that you get to return to these worlds, to see the stories and characters that you get so ironically invested in actually continue. The only recent examples I can think of is the Christmas Prince trilogy and the upcoming Venom sequel. You all have no idea how hyped I am for that movie. But enough about that comic book movie bullshit. Let's talk about some real cinema. Watching this movie was a powerful jolt of energy in the midst of this pandemic, and it took me back to a simpler time. I was so happy to just dive back into this weird, wacky world. I knew that my reactions to this movie would be energetic, excited, perhaps even violent, so I made sure to set up a mic while my roommate and I watched it for the first time. We're picking up where we left off!
Considering where we left off.
Yeah! My biggest concern going into this movie, having not read the book it's based on, was that it wouldn't capture that same chaotic energy that fueled the first movie. It might be tapered back and made more palatable for a general audience, but thankfully, this is the sequel that fans deserved. So, what's the story this time? Well, Elle and Lee are going into their senior year of high school, while Elle maintains a long-distance relationship with her boyfriend Noah while he's away at Harvard. A new kid, Marco Pena, comes to the high school, starting a competitive streak with Elle. Elle's relationship with Noah begins to get rocky as she gets jealous of his attractive new friend at Harvard, Chloe.
Hello, boys.
Uh-oh, a woman.
A
Elle and Lee made a childhood promise to go to Berkeley together, but Elle also applies to Harvard in secret and signs up for a Dance Dance Revolution competition to help pay her tuition. This video's script was written by Dr. Seuss, apparently. While all this is happening, Lee's relationship with his girlfriend Rachel is getting increasingly strained because they never have any time alone and Elle is always hanging out with them, which Lee promises to fix, but never does. Elle goes to visit Noah in Boston and finds an earring under his bed, leading her to believe that he's been cheating on her. Noah promises that he isn't. Lee pretends to injure his leg so Marco can take over to help Elle with the competition, since she has a better shot at winning with him. As Elle and Marco rehearse, they begin to get more and more attracted to each other. Elle also discovers that the earring she found belongs to Chloe. Just to be clear, at this point, I'm like halfway through the movie. The plot is just so complex. There are so many layers. When the dance competition arrives, Elle and Marco win, and Elle kisses Marco, not knowing that Noah came home early to watch the performance. Don't you do it!
Do it.
No! Boo! At Thanksgiving dinner, every conflict comes to a head, and the central relationships all fall apart, with Rachel angry at Lee for not talking to Elle confronting Noah about the earring, and Lee confronting Elle about Harvard. On the day of the school's fundraiser, the eponymous kissing booth returns, Lee and Rachel reunite, and Elle realizes that she wants to be with Noah, despite admitting that she does have feelings for Marco. Elle and Noah reunite at the famous gazebo. Elle and Lee graduate from high school, and Elle tells her friends that she was waitlisted at every university she applied to, but in truth, she was accepted to both Berkeley and Harvard, but wasn't able to make a decision. That plot summary is as succinct as I could possibly manage because this movie is dense. Not dense like stupid, but well, actually, The Kissing Booth 2 is surprisingly ambitious. The story is much more complicated and convoluted than the first movie's relatively straightforward, secretly dating the bad boy with a heart of gold plot. There are roughly 7 key relationships to follow, all of which go through their own arcs, plus subplots following side characters and college applications and a giant dance competition. I don't quite know what I expected from The Kissing Booth 2, to, but it wasn't this. However, as the world's biggest fan of The Kissing Booth, it didn't take long for me to settle into this movie, because thankfully, it's still absolutely insane. Once again, director Vince Marcello finds the most ridiculous ways to stage pretty much every scene, and I'm guessing there was a budgetary increase for this movie because they spared no expense. And what's so wonderful about the world of The Kissing Booth is that the strangeness isn't just surface level. There are layers to it. It's as intricate as Joey King's wig. Man, with every passing second, her wig looks more like a wig. For example, the scene where Elle talks to this girl, who was in the first movie for 5 seconds, and I guess they're friends now, about Marco. Elle accidentally hits the school's PA button when she's shown a video of Marco working out, and she starts talking about how hot he is, you know, comedy, and Lee goes to stop her. In the process of doing this, Lee engages in a full Universal Studios stunt show to get across the school, culminating in him running into a mascot with a birthday cake, because this all takes place on the principal's birthday for some reason.
What the is going on? Stop! Jesus Christ!
What does all that have to do with anything? Good question. But that is the spirit of The Kissing Booth. Pure, unbridled chaos. And because this movie has the luxurious runtime of 2 hours and 10 minutes, it just drags you deeper and deeper and deeper into its pits of craziness. Once again, I'd like to talk about the idea of conflict in romantic comedies. This movie is chock full of it, and shockingly, it's kinda dumb. But romantic comedies need conflict, like, you know, most stories do, and this genre in particular derives most of it from the characters' direct actions and inactions. But the tiny little obstacle the Kissing Booth franchise keeps running into is making that conflict make sense. Because if your conflict could be solved by one character saying one sentence to someone else, it may come off as a bit forced. That's pretty much how every conflict in this movie works, and all of them are resolved by the simplest interactions possible. For example, the earring that Elle finds under Noah's bed, the core conflict of the story. It doesn't seem like there's a simple, straightforward answer or a misunderstanding that would lead to that being there. But then, after the big Thanksgiving argument, Chloe just says that she crashed in Noah's room once when he was out of town and must have dropped the earring then.
The earring must have just fallen off then.
Why wouldn't you tell me that?
A very good question, and the answer is because the movie needed to happen, I guess. Chloe also looks super familiar. Where do I know that actress from? No. Leave me alone. Lee and Rachel's conflict also feels pointless because all Rachel wants is some space so she can be alone with her boyfriend, not to cut off all contact with Elle or anything. The movie tries to justify this as some sort of internal conflict for Lee by having him notice how sad and lonely Elle is without Noah, but Elle seems to have other friends. For the first time, she actually interacts with other characters without Noah or Lee being around, so it's not like she'd have nobody else to talk to at all. Maybe if she spent more time with other characters, it might help flesh out a subplot the movie is already devoting way too much time to, or something. I don't know, I'm just brainstorming. So, like the first movie, the fact that the conflict never makes sense and just gets stretched out further and further is frustrating, but also strangely charming. But don't worry, there are still those few special moments that make even my skin crawl peppered in there.
I'm going to treat you like my own personal jungle gym.
I've always found the universe of this series to be its most interesting aspect, and a lot of time in this movie is devoted to fleshing out the world around Elle, deepening the lore, if you will. In terms of quality between films, and given the increase in the scale and complexity of the plot, I don't think it's unfair to compare this movie to The Godfather Part 2. Okay, maybe a more apt comparison would be with To All the Boys, P.S. I Still Love You, because these movies share almost the exact same plot. Main character getting ready for college, their relationship with their boyfriend becoming strained over another woman, a new potential love interest entering their life, a blonde friend who has their own love story subplot, and the main relationship falling apart but ultimately reconciling when faced with the choice between the two love interests. Also, both movies basically end exactly where they started, with the main love story back on track like nothing ever happened because nothing did happen, which is how all great stories are told, right back to square one. And like John Ambrose McLaren, Marco is just this perfect guy who does nothing wrong and honestly seems like a much better love interest for the protagonist, but is ultimately cast aside for some boring dude. I'm sorry, Noah, I love you, but the sequel was so boring. Also, knowing the story of this series as intimately as I do, the idea that Elle and Noah's love has to be tested like this is just laughable. Noah was a creepy, manipulative weirdo for the entirety of the first movie, and he essentially acts like a completely different person in this one. It's like how Superman changed between BVS and Justice League. You can pretend like this is what the character is, but I saw the other movie. So what's Elle's other option like? Well, it's not too clear. Marco is this movie's greatest enigma. I truly have no idea what his character is. Initially, I thought he was going to contrast with Noah in some way, but they act pretty much exactly the same. They also look pretty much exactly the same. Throughout the movie, we get no real insight to Marco at all. The closest we get is when Elle asks him what he wants to do in the future, and he says,
"Not sure. You happy, I guess?"
Oh my god, I love these movies so much. And it's weird because the opportunities were there. Early in the story, Marco makes a bet with Elle about working the kissing booth, where Elle has to babysit his sister for free if she loses. So immediately, I thought, okay, Elle's going to lose and then babysit his sister and find out that her and Marco are super compatible by getting closer with his family. Maybe Elle would find out that Marco actually needs the money from the dance competition more than she does, and she would have to choose between being with Noah at Harvard and this new connection she's found, helping this family, with the money becoming the symbol of this choice. But instead, Elle wins the bet and nothing happens. The sister is never seen or mentioned again, and Marco is never seen working the kissing booth, so I don't know what the point of this was. Their love story arc is just so weird. Elle seems to hate Marco because he beats her at a track and field competition, which the student body was way too into, and then they dance in an arcade a few times and she just falls in love with him. Oh yeah, that old story. Marco's only defining characteristic is playing guitar. He just always has a guitar. I'm not sure why he's so into Elle or why the movie ends by implying their connection isn't over, because he's just kinda there. It's the rare case where neither of the love interests can really be pointed to as identifiably better or worse for the main character, because neither of these guys have personalities. I wish this movie didn't spend so much time on the love triangle, because I never once believed for a second that Elle would actually leave Noah in the end. I also never believed for a second that Noah was actually cheating on Elle, because that's not the kind of movie this is. Although, like the first one, I really have no idea what this movie is going for most of the time. If Noah was cheating, or Elle decided to go with Marco at the end, then the movie might be about something, or challenge the characters in a meaningful way. That's not what this movie's trying to do, though, so all you can really do is sit back and enjoy the ride. But that brings me to the biggest question of all, the question that's on all of our minds, I'm sure, which is, why the didn't Yearbook Guy get a subplot? Of all the characters to follow, you go with these two? They didn't even have names until this movie. Not only does this movie not feature a character arc for Yearbook Guy, he's barely even in it. He's been relegated to the background, and also, he's goth now?
That was Yearbook Guy again. He was goth. He was hanging out with the piercings girl.
The whole movie, I was waiting for him to see something wacky and say yearbook, but it never happened. I could point to at least 10 events in this movie that would have been made exponentially funnier if Yearbook Guy had punctuated them. But no. Plus, they recast one of the OMG girls. Don't think I didn't notice. Don't think that I would ever overlook this.
No, yeah, they did. The blonde was different.
They recast Mia. This is bullshit.
In the end, though, this movie's biggest problem lies right at the center, which is that Elle Evans is a terrible character. I don't think Joey King is doing a bad job, but she really doesn't have anything to work with. Elle is incapable of making a decision, or trusting anyone, or reading basic social cues in most cases. And despite that, again and again, the narrative rewards her. She gets everything she wants, despite being the one who does everything wrong in the story and should be growing and learning. This comes back to the fantastical nature of the kissing booth, where every conflict pretty much boils down to simple misunderstandings that make all the characters look stupid. Also, how did she get into Harvard? There's no way it's that easy to get into Harvard.
As if I could get into Harvard.
If he could, you could. Anyone could.
And if you want to have a character get upset and jealous about her boyfriend's female friend, maybe having her go on romantic beachside outings and slow dancing with this guy isn't the best way to keep the audience on her side.
Come on. You.
Then again, the fact remains that I don't really come to the Kissing Booth franchise for realism. I come to it for moments like Elle seeing a poster for a competition, and instead of taking one of the many flyers advertising it, she just rips down the poster. Or this part where they left what looks like an outtake in the movie. Or just bizarre stylistic choices.
Whoa! Whoa!
And you know what the weirdest part of all this is? I really don't think this movie is that bad. Sure, it's not gonna win Oscars, but the story is still a notable improvement over the first movie, and there were some moments that actually made me excited, like when they revealed that Noah had brought Chloe home with him for Thanksgiving. That was great.
Yeah, come inside.
Oh! Oh!
You know, listening back through this reaction footage, I had a couple brief moments of lucidity where I wondered if maybe I was a little too into this movie, but there's no way that's true. I definitely didn't get emotional or anything. I mean, what was I gonna do? Cry? No, not at all.
I'm not crying.
Oh my god.
I'm not crying.
Oh my god.
Don't look at me.
It's the Kissing Booth
It is.
2.
Now, before you all start bullying me, in my defense, because there are only 2 Kissing Booth books, I assumed there would only be 2 Kissing Booth movies, excluding, of course, the tie-in novella that was written to bridge the 2 books, which we all know about. So, as the graduation scene was happening, I thought this was the last time I'd ever see these characters, and that's a big deal for me, apparently, because when they existed in the bubble of the first movie, it was easy to just laugh at it as this contained, so bad it's good experience. But something about being brought back into this world and getting to see everyone go on another weird, wacky adventure just deepened my love of this franchise. Like I've said before, that love is ironic, but at this point, I think I may have gone so deep into irony that I circled around and just legitimately enjoy these movies now, which feels like the kind of confession I should only make at gunpoint, but here we are. Still, this movie is not without its moments. There are some fun jokes. Jacob Elordi's performance was a big step up from the last movie. The Boston montage was great. There's a lot of stuff to like.
You know what? I'm kind of digging this.
And the idea of giving the characters this nice send-off was legitimately heartwarming. It felt like the finale to a high school TV show. I was just super into it. And then the movie threw one last curveball, and I became happier than I've ever been.
Oh! Did she lie?
Or she...
Oh!
Words can't describe how I felt in the moment where I realized there was going to be a third movie. I imagine it's kind of like holding your child for the first time, just world shifting.
Yeah, they're going for 3, baby. Oh, they're gonna do it. They're gonna do it.
And then, a couple days later, the news dropped that the third movie had already been filmed in secret and will be released next year. The audacity of thinking this needed to be filmed in secret is stunning, and so is the fact that I screeched like a wounded owl when I first read this headline. I was just so hyped. This franchise is just so weird. The fact that it's a franchise at all is so weird. The fact that this movie made me cry is also weird, but more expected. The Kissing Booth 2 is just such a fundamentally strange movie. It's a movie that couldn't exist before streaming platforms like Netflix, and definitely wouldn't get the kind of attention it's gotten if it was in theaters. And honestly, probably wouldn't have been made at all if it was going to theaters. So I guess we should just all be thankful that we exist in the same timeline as these movies. I mean, I could do without the global pandemic, but the trade-off is well worth it. When I was rewatching this movie and taking notes for this video, I found myself enjoying it much more often than not. If Kissing Booth 3 plays out along the same lines of quality as this movie, and I expect it will, I have no reason not to be excited. I'm sure a lot of people out there wonder who this movie is made for, and I think the answer is me. This movie was made for me. Who else wanted this? Who else would sit through this so many times? There's no reward here, you won't learn anything. This movie could only entertain someone as deeply invested / broken as I am. Someone who's shown all of their friends The Kissing Booth, and who tricked several friends into watching the sequel. I know that Kissing Booth 3 will very likely be the last of these movies, but I say why stop there? Let's just keep pumping these bad boys out. Let's make this series the new Fast and Furious. Just throw out a new one every couple years and get progressively more insane. Give Ollie and Miles their own Hobbs and Shaw-esque spin-off movie where they become secret agents. I've already written several fan fictions about that. Give Yearbook Guy his own spin-off that turns into Nightcrawler or something. Just expand the Kissing Booth cinematic universe, or KBCU, as much as possible. What I'm really saying is this: let me write The Kissing Booth 4. I have so many ideas. Netflix, if you would just hear me out. In all seriousness though, or as much seriousness as this stupid video deserves, I did have a really good time with The Kissing Booth 2, for all its silliness. It gave me everything I wanted and more, including several things I never would have expected.
You know, and I'll be honest, of all the things to see in The Kissing Booth 2, I did not expect a Jean Cocteau reference.
I'm just so excited for Kissing Booth 3 because I never could have imagined that I'd be able to indulge in a guilty pleasure for this long and with so many new installments. And on top of that, we're getting a sequel to After this fall, which just goes to show 2020 has been a great year all around for everyone. So guys, those are my thoughts on The Kissing Booth 2, my favorite movie of 2020. That's barely a joke. Thanks very much for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, feel free to leave a like and subscribe for more. I'll see you next time.
You know, if I ever become a famous director, I'm gonna make a good movie just to put Joey King in it and break her streak of only being in pieces of shit movies.